In Episode 2, we explored how desire keeps us exposed to frustration. Today, we take the next step and look at what happens when discipline no longer seeks approval and has to survive in silence. Think about the last time you stayed consistent with something. The early mornings, the quiet effort, the days that looked the same from the outside. Now think about how long that lasted once the attention faded. No comments, no praise, no visible reward. That's where discipline usually slips, not with resistance, with silence. Epictetus understood this problem long before social media, performance culture, or productivity apps existed, because he lived in a world where discipline almost never came with recognition. Epictetus was born into slavery. He didn't have a public identity to protect. He didn't have a reputation to build. He didn't have an audience to impress. Most of what he did, no matter how difficult, happened unnoticed. And that forced him to confront a question most people avoid. What happens to discipline when no one is watching? This wasn't theoretical for him. In his life, effort didn't lead to praise. Endurance didn't lead to status. Self-control didn't lead to admiration. If discipline depended on being seen, it wouldn't survive. So he had to find a version of discipline that worked in private. That's the struggle at the center of this episode. Not how to act well, but how to keep acting well when there's no external signal telling you it matters. Epictetus noticed something early. People often confuse discipline with performance. They do the right thing, but part of them is waiting for acknowledgement, a look, a reaction, a signal that says, yes, this counts. When that signal doesn't arrive, effort starts to feel pointless. Epictetus believed this was a fragile foundation, because anything built on recognition collapses when recognition disappears, and recognition always disappears. So he made a hard distinction. There is discipline that exists for display, and there is discipline that exists for alignment. Only one of them lasts. For Epictetus, discipline had to answer a simple test. Would I still do this if no one ever knew? If the answer was no, the discipline wasn't real yet. This idea didn't come from idealism. It came from his reality. Most of his effort went unseen. And if unseen effort felt meaningless, his inner life would slowly unravel. So he reframed the purpose of discipline entirely. Discipline wasn't proof. It wasn't identity. It wasn't a message to the world. It was a private agreement between action and conscience. That's the solution Epictetus arrived at. Discipline that doesn't need witnesses. Discipline that doesn't rely on momentum from outside. Discipline that can survive long stretches of invisibility. This is why his teachings carry weight. Not because they sound impressive, but because they were forged in conditions where attention was scarce. His discipline worked when the usual incentives were absent. Over time, this made him different. While others depended on praise to stay consistent, he depended on alignment. While others drifted when no one was watching, he stayed steady. Not loud, not celebrated, just reliable. Eventually, people noticed. Not because he tried to be seen, but because quiet consistency has gravity. Even powerful figures began seeking him out. Not because he performed wisdom, but because he lived it privately first. But here's where the story turns uncomfortable. Because this version of discipline has a cost. And it's not a small one. When you stop doing things for recognition, you also stop receiving some of the energy that comes with it. Praise can lift you. Validation can sustain you. Shared effort can feel lighter. When discipline becomes private, you carry more of the weight alone. Epictetus accepted that trade, but it reshaped his emotional world. He didn't rely on approval, which meant he also didn't receive much warmth from it. He gained independence, But independence often comes with distance. This is the part people rarely talk about. Quiet discipline can feel isolating, not dramatic isolation, just a steady sense that fewer people truly see your effort. Epictetus believed that was the price of inner freedom. If your discipline depends on being noticed, someone else always has leverage over you. If it doesn't, you're harder to shake, but also harder to reach. This tension sits at the heart of his philosophy, and it matters deeply in modern life. Today, discipline is often public by default. We announce routines, we track progress, we share milestones. There's nothing wrong with that. But it creates a subtle dependency. Effort begins to expect an audience. When the audience fades, discipline struggles to breathe. You start asking questions like, does this still matter if no one sees it? Is this worth continuing if it's quiet? That's not a failure. It's a signal. Epictetus would say this is the moment discipline is tested, not when it's difficult, but when it's invisible. He would ask, if this never becomes impressive, if it never earns acknowledgement, if it never becomes part of how people see you, would you still choose it? That question isn't meant to shame. It's meant to clarify. There's a version of discipline that builds identity, and a version that builds character. They overlap sometimes, but they are not the same. Epictetus chose character, because character is something you carry even when circumstances strip everything else away. This doesn't mean recognition is bad. It means it's unstable. It comes and goes. And if discipline leans on it too heavily, it collapses when conditions change. This is where many people feel stuck. They're capable of effort. They're capable of consistency, but only when it feels socially reinforced. When that reinforcement disappears, everything feels heavier. Epictetus doesn't offer encouragement here. He offers a shift. He asks you to relocate where effort draws meaning from, not from reaction, but from alignment. That means learning to finish things quietly, to keep promises no one knows about, to value completion over display. This is not glamorous. It doesn't scale well online, but it builds something stable. Here's the quiet benefit. When discipline no longer depends on applause, you stop negotiating with attention. You stop asking if today's effort is worth it. You act because action aligns with who you're choosing to be. Now bring this back to your own life. Where does your discipline expect acknowledgement? Where does effort quietly ask to be seen? Where does consistency weaken when things get quiet? These questions aren't accusations. They're mirrors. Epictetus doesn't tell you to remove recognition. He tells you not to depend on it, to let it be extra, not essential. That's the shift this episode points toward. Discipline that can survive invisibility. Discipline that continues even when nothing responds. Discipline that doesn't collapse when attention moves elsewhere. I've turned this idea into a simple one-page guide, not to make effort harder, but to help you build discipline that doesn't require applause to continue. It's free. It's linked below. If you have a different perspective, or if you've read the Desire Framework from Episode 2, I'd genuinely like to read your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to follow this series, you're welcome to subscribe. This was Episode 3 in our 5-part series on Epictetus and discipline. Next, we'll look at the emotional cost of total self-command and what happens when discipline begins to create distance from others. I'll see you in the next episode.